Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, you guys were out of practice. I blame myself. Welcome to Lunch with Books, and welcome to March. March is Women's History Month, for one thing, among many other things, Irish American History Month. We try to celebrate as many as we can. If you wouldn't mind turning your cell phones off at this point. Sometimes I forget to ask that, and inevitably, I hear a cell phone. And sometimes even when I do say it. This Thursday, if you were participating in the People's University Ancient History, you know that we had to cancel a couple of classes due to illness, but we will have a finale, which will incorporate both the Roman Empire and Pompeii in one class. See how it's done this Thursday at 7 p.m. with Dr. Diener. Now, on March 14th, the very popular Fair May will be here. They're doing a lot of gigs these days. I see them everywhere. But here they'll be doing something a little different. You won't get Rebel tunes anywhere else. You'll get them here on the 14th, sort of the centennial of the Irish Civil War, and we'll be doing some, as I said, Rebel tunes. Now, March 21, West Virginia Humanities History Alive, we have Colonel Ruby Bradley, who was the most, let's see if I get this right, the most decorated woman in American military history when she retired in 1963. She's from West Virginia, and hear all about her. She's portrayed by Becky Park of Charleston, West Virginia. Today we have for you, we're going to talk about trailblazing West Virginia women. And our guest is a West Virginia native, of course, Nikki Bowman Mills, founded New South Media in 2008 and serves as president of the company, publisher, and editor-in-chief. Her mission was to create a high-caliber publications that changed the perceptions of West Virginia by championing the state with positive stories. What started as a regional company has exponentially grown into a national multimedia company. A consummate entrepreneur and founder of Turn This Town Around, Nikki champions small business development and entrepreneurship and has been honored with many tourism, small business, and media industry awards. She graduated from WVU and received her master's degree in writing from DePaul University in Chicago. Please welcome Nikki Bowman Mills.
Thank you. I am Scotch-Irish and a woman, so you're getting a twofer today for your month of March. Do I just hit the arrow to change? Yeah, okay, got it. So yeah, my name is Nikki Bowman Mills, and I am the founder of New South Media. I grew up in Clay County and had left West Virginia after I had graduated, moved to Chicago, and I'd worked in magazines around the country before moving home in 2008 to start New South Media. So our first magazine, just to give you a little bit of background about my company, was West Virginia Living magazine. Started that in 2008. I followed that with West Virginia Weddings magazine, then Morgantown magazine, and then we took over the contract for Wonderful West Virginia, which is the oldest magazine in the state, celebrating about 87 years, I think, at this point. So you're probably familiar with that. When we won the contract, because Wonderful West Virginia is actually owned by DNR, it's a government publication, but when we won the contract for Wonderful West Virginia, it was really very meaningful to me because that is the magazine I grew up reading. My grandmother had a subscription, and it's one of the reasons I credit with going into this business. So I have to tell a little funny story because I had started my company and owned several magazines. I was doing a lot of stuff. I go visit my grandma, and I said to my grandma, I said, you know what? I said, that Wonderful West Virginia magazine you have on your coffee table? I said, I'm going to be the editor of that. We're going to be designing it and writing all the stories. And my grandmother said, oh, she goes, thank goodness, I was so worried about you. So I finally had made it in her eyes. So anyway, so those are some of the publications, but we do more. I say we're not a typical media company, and I didn't want to be when we started the company. We start a lot of initiatives as well, and as was said earlier, I'm really fascinated about economic development stories, stories of entrepreneurship too. So we, these are just some of the initiatives that we have started. One that was mentioned before was Turn This Town Around, and that was about 8 or 9 years ago. It was a pretty amazing program that we went into towns, and Benedum helped fund it. And we really wanted, it was like a living laboratory to figure out what do our dying towns, how do we turn them around, and to kind of look at them from small, medium, and big projects. So that's one that's near and dear to my heart. But we also have the Best of West Virginia initiative. We have a Best of Morgantown. We call it the BOM Awards. We're launching a podcast called This is West Virginia Living. We also had an initiative called Come Home WV as well. And then the one that we're going to be talking about today is our Wonder Woman program that we started about 10 years ago. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about West Virginia's Wonder Women before I talk about some of the our Wonder Women from history. But I realized when I started my company that I really didn't have any mentors. You know, I didn't have any great female mentors. So I thought about who would if I could just pick 50 mentors that I had, you know, around the state, could I come up with 50 women I would really like to know and learn from? So the very first class of West Virginia Wonder Women was the 50 people in West Virginia that I just really had admired and come across in the years of working on the publications. Then from that point on, I asked every class to nominate the next classes. So those first 50 women, the next year, they nominated women who they thought should be West Virginia's Wonder Women. And these really are change makers, people who are building a better state, women who are building a better state. So from year to year, that has grown. Today, we probably, anytime we start looking like we are now at our Wonder Women that will be chosen for the fall issue, we have 500 or so folks that we have to get down, you know, narrow it down to about 50. So it's really, really grown. We have a big event in Charleston every year, and it's a lot of fun. It's my favorite day. It's so inspiring. And we have a speaker who comes in. So this year we'll be celebrating 10 years. So we're really going to be working on some fun, different things that we're going to be doing this year that I'm pretty excited about. But, now I put this at the end. That's right. So at the end, if we have time, I'm going to share with you the video that we play at the end of our Wonder Woman luncheon, just so you can get a feel for who all of these women are. But as you know, and I'm going to move this over because I feel like you can see it, right? Okay. As I said in the magazine article that we wrote in fall of last year, women who speak their minds have inspired a choice vocabulary throughout history. Words like battle axe, harpy, shrew, Amazon, hellcat. These aren't names of admiration, right? They imply judgments like bad temper, frightening, and repulsive. They're used by people who find feminine strength inconvenient. But West Virginia has a rich history of women who have been just fine being inconvenient when it served their purpose. They're women who have shown up in places they were expected to stay away from, and they've spoken up when they were expected to be quiet. They're women who have made people uncomfortable in defense of family, community, public health, equity, and common sense. But thanks to these women today, we have more say in dialogues than ever before. So we honor these muckrakers, trailblazers, and glass ceiling breakers whose mettle has amplified all of our voices. So when I start to talk about some of these women, you will see we have a strong tradition of strong women. And here are just a few. Anne Newport Royal. I discovered this book actually and didn't realize her connections to West Virginia. But when Anne when her widowed mother moved her family to Sweet Springs, Virginia. Has anybody been to Sweet Springs, West Virginia? It's a resort. It was much like the Greenbrier in its day. People came, Thomas Jefferson supposedly, came there. But this is where she is from. There was a man who arranged for her education. His name was Major William Royal. The two were eventually married, but he left her a widow in her 40s. So to support herself, Royal traveled northeastern cities and interviewing influential residents. She wrote careful researched accounts for subscribers. Her books, first published in 1826, and later her newspapers that she had launched, exposed corruption, fraud, and political misdealings. She made a lot of enemies. She was taken to court in 1829 on charges of being a common scold. But history now sees her as the first of the muck-raking journalists, an irreverent woman telling it like it was. More than once, the media championed her bold exercise of press freedoms. When the court found her indeed a common scold, for example, two reporters from DC, respected national, I think they worked at the National Intelligencer, I think it's where they were from, paid her $10 fine for her. So Belle Boyd and Nancy Hart. Women have historically been sidelined during wartime, but our women haven't always been content with that. During the Civil War, Belle Boyd, who was born in Martinsburg and lived her early childhood there, acted as a Confederate spy for her father's hotel in Front Royal, Virginia. She took big risks and she was arrested at least 6 times. Information she passed to Stonewall Jackson in May 1962 earned her a captain's commission in the Confederate Army. In Roane County, Nancy Hart, a teen already proficient with firearms, worked as a Confederate scout and spy. The local lore says Hart was captured twice. The first time, she persuaded her captors to release her. The second time, in July of 1862, she escaped her Summersville captivity, returning a week later with 200 Confederate soldiers to capture the Summersville outpost. Mary Harris, Mother Jones, and Sarah Ma Blizzard. The post-Civil War years didn't go well for Mary Harris Jones. You probably know her story, but she lost her husband and children to the yellow fever in 1867, then lost her home and dress shop to the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. The advancing Industrial Revolution was imposing insufferable conditions on workers everywhere at the time. And Jones found her new family in the labor movement and took fiercely to organizing. She inspired workers and their families to act collectively. She became known for organizing wives and children to demonstrate on behalf of striking workers. Jones worked in states across the growing nation, but in West Virginia, she walked from coal camp to rally mine workers to unite against mine owners. By 1902, her work called her the most dangerous woman in America. Mother Jones was jailed leading a strike in West Virginia in 1902 at the impressive age of 71, and a second time in 1913 at 82. While Jones organized everywhere, Sarah Blizzard, Ma Blizzard, worked in the trenches here in West Virginia. Her family was evicted from her Fayette County home because of her work with striking miners in 1902. They moved to Cabin Creek in Kanawha County and became involved in the violent Cabin Creek strike of 1912 to 1913. In one incident, Blizzard led women to end the terror of the Bull Moose Special. It was an armored train car of machine guns that were fired into striking miners' tent colonies. And this is how she did it. They destroyed the train tracks to prevent its return. Women pulled up the train tracks so that it would be derailed. Ma Blizzard and Mother Jones sometimes worked together in support of uniting miners. When I was working on this story and we were reading about this, another story that I remember reading about was women who were married to striking miners would lay overnight in the cold by the trains and with guns underneath their dresses. And when the trains came in with the folks who were going to break the strike, they just started shooting at them. And then they would just keep going on the trains. You know, it was really, it was amazing. It is amazing to think about the heritage of women in the mine wars, because not a lot is really known about it, although more folks are starting to talk about it. Another group of women that we thought were really kind of the precursors to some of our modern day Wonder Women were what we call the birth workers. Everywhere throughout human history, women have birthed babies outside of hospitals with the help of family or friends who have learned from more, experienced community members. These lay midwives took charge and made really hard decisions bedside, often with no expectation of pay. My aunt was born in a chicken coop and a midwife delivered her. And that's not all that long ago, right? So, although it's a lot longer than I would care to admit, probably. In frontier times and in remote hollows, there is much about our mountain state through most of our history that these women did it with very little resources. If your great grandparents were born in West Virginia, there's a good chance they were helped by a midwife. The late 1800s and the 1900s brought the steady advance of medicine, and medically assisted births. Practitioners were gradually professionalized as nurse midwives, or they were marginalized. Practicing midwives had to be licensed annually beginning in 1926, and they practiced under really strict constraints. The number of licensed midwives declined from a peak in the 1920s, and eventually medically assisted hospital births became the overwhelming norm. So a shout out to today's midwives, keeping knowledge of natural childbirth alive, and to the women who delivered many of our ancestors. Lena Lowe Yost and Irene Drucker Bro. Many accomplished women of the late 19th and early 20th centuries were committed suffragists. In addition to their primary achievements, among them, Dr. Harriet Jones. Jones grew up in Terra Alta in the 1860s and 70s and pursued medical studies in Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago, specializing in gynecology and abdominal surgery. And in 1886, she opened a private practice here in Wheeling, which I just learned not very far from here. Dr. Jones went on to serve as assistant superintendent of Weston State Hospital, then to establish a women's hospital in Wheeling, which isn't very far from here. She also served as a secretary of the West Virginia Anti-Tuberculosis League. So while she was breaking the glass ceiling in medicine and improving healthcare for women and for all, Dr. Jones advocated for women to be accepted as students at WVU, a practice that did not begin until the institution was 22 years old in 1889. After women won the right to vote in 1920, Jones became one of the first female state lawmakers, serving 2 terms as a Marshall County delegate. At the age of 82, according to the notes kept with the archive photo that's here, Jones still did most of her own sewing. So you have a heritage here in Wheeling of very strong women. In fact, I have to share something. You probably, have you heard of the West Virginia Hillbilly, right? That's very old. I just bought this on eBay, and I bought it because it was on my birthday. This one was from 1971, but very first story I have to share with you. The very first story says the story behind the story. After Rebecca Harding Davis, mother of the famed war correspondent Richard Harding Davis, left her girlhood town of Wheeling to go out into the world and become a roving correspondent for Harper's Magazine, one of her first assignments was back in West Virginia. I had never heard of her, so she's also a native daughter here of Wheeling and worked for a pretty esteemed publication in its day. Oh, I didn't flip it there. So there's Harriet Jones. There's Harriet Jones doing her sewing. I so would have liked to have met her. Hazel Dickens. I have met Hazel Dickens when I was a little girl. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Morris brothers from Clay County. Has anybody heard of them? They're my uncles, and they started something called the Morris Family Morris Family Reunion. Became a music festival that then became Vandalia. So I got to meet Hazel Dickens when she was much younger, and I was only like 3 years old. But she is the bluegrass legend. She sang for those who had no voice. She was born in Mercer County in 1925, which is funny because I always thought she was from Clay County. I was like, I don't know why. I think I just made that connection. She was there, and since it was the Morris Family Reunion, I must be related to her, but apparently there is no connection. But she was raised in coal country and in deep poverty. She followed siblings to Baltimore as a teenager and became a part of a lively scene of house jams, club gigs, and in 1965, her first record with Alice Gerard. Their band, the Strange Creek Singers, recorded one of Dickens' first song of social commentary in 1972. It was called Black Lung, and it was written for her brother, Thurman, who died of the disease. Her later songs spoke forcefully for minors and for women, and she became a powerful advocate communicating the struggles of workers and families to a very wide audience. Other songs celebrated the comfort and beauty of the Mountain State. She recorded 11 albums. She appeared in the 1987 Mine Wardens film Matewan and more. I think she was also in maybe Hazard USA as well. She was the first woman to receive the International Bluegrass Music Association Award, and she received the highest musical honors, including the major award from the Smithsonian Institution for her work. Memphis, Tennessee, Carter Garrison. Named for the city where her aunt worked as a teacher, Memphis, Tennessee, Carter Garrison started her own career as a teacher in a one-room school in Gary in McDowell County. In 1908, she started there in 1908 and taught into the 1950s. She also wanted to be a lawyer and likely would have made a good one. She served as a mediator for the U.S. Steel's coal mines in Gary, resolving miners' conflicts and concerns, at first informally, and then from 1931 to 1946 on behalf of U.S. Steel. Garrison was a community builder who set up a breakfast program for her students during the Great Depression. She organized cultural events to uplift those around her, and she was a civil rights activist. In 1921, she established the Gary branch of the NAACP. The Christmas Seal fundraiser she established for it out of her house in 1927 was so successful that after 4 years, the national office took it over. Christmas seal sales supported the NAACP's work in advancing the major national civil rights laws of the 1950s and 60s. She retired to Huntington in 1952. She established a Black Girl Scout group there and served the national NAACP organization, including as its vice president. Her legacy was stronger children, a stronger Black community, a stronger West Virginia, and a stronger Appalachia. Mildred Mitchell Bateman. Mildred wanted to be a doctor at the time, at the age of 12. And this is in the mid-1930s, when she volunteered to help survivors of a tornado that tore through her hometown. Although she was preparing for general practice, she felt called by a 1947 opening at Lakin State Hospital near Point Pleasant. It was the state's psychiatric hospital for Black patients. Many believed at the time that mental health patients could not be helped. But Dr. Mitchell Bateman brought fresh hope to her profession as she advanced at Lakin to clinical director and then in 1958 to superintendent. She pioneered straightforward new approaches with great success, including pairing the mentally disabled with retirees and integrating patients considered untreatable into the general population. She also raised staff salaries. She established a 40-hour work week, which was revolutionary at that time. She became the first Black woman to lead a West Virginia state agency when she was appointed Commissioner of Mental Health in 1962, and the first Black woman to hold an American Psychiatric Association office when she was elected the National Vice President in 1973. She was founding chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Marshall University School of Medicine and served on President Jimmy Carter's Select Commission on Mental Health. Mitchell Bateman never stopped advocating for patients, telling the Herald-Dispatch in 2009, and she was in her late 80s, that more funding and attention were needed, including at the hospital in Huntington that a decade earlier the state had renamed in her honor. She said, "I'm really hopeful that we can get back on track and get this overcrowding situation solved again," she said. And the legacy, as we go through the years and we look at women, why we felt this was important to share in the magazine was it is a legacy. We are standing on the shoulders of the women who came before us, and we have a lot to be grateful for. One of the things that we think going forward will also be a motivation and inspiration for others are our West Virginia teachers and the strike in particular that happened in 2018, when thousands of teachers and school service personnel gathered on the steps of the state capitol in freezing rain, waving signs with slogans like, "We'll work for insurance," and "If you can read this, thank a teacher." Many wore red bandanas around their throats. The majority were women. It was the beginning of the 2018 West Virginia teacher strike, the historic work stoppage that shut the state's entire school system down for 9 days. Tensions have been growing for years, but the 2018 legislative session proved a perfect storm for union members. Christine Campbell, then president of the American Federation of Teachers, West Virginia chapter, told us with legislation in play to undermine public education and weaken unions, just as public employees were facing drastic increases to health insurance premiums. On top of that, West Virginia teacher pay consistently ranked among the lowest in the nation. By the end of the strike, despite opposition from the legislative leadership, teachers got those bills defeated and their pay increased by 5%. And they made lawmakers promise to shore up insurance funding. "It was something I will never forget," said Jessica Salfia, an English teacher at Spring Mills High in Berkeley County, and she was the co-editor of the book 55 Strong Inside the West Virginia Teacher Strike. "It was the power of a collective voice." Teachers have inspired similar movements in Arizona, Colorado, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Oklahoma, where it wasn't uncommon to see teachers carrying signs that said, don't make me go West Virginia on you. And the rabble rousing continues. You know, another person, and it's actually on the cover, she's on the cover, as another Wheeling resident, Amy Jo Hutchison. I didn't include this on here, but you'll see her in the video. But I will never forget watching, and you probably had seen her, you may know her personally, but when she testified in front of Congress about the struggles of the working poor. So this Wheeling native spoke from her lived experience as a single mother. She said, I have 2 jobs and a bachelor's degree, and I struggle to make ends meet, she told lawmakers. She said, the federal poverty guidelines say that I'm not poor, but I cashed in a jar full of change the other day so my daughter could attend a music competition with her school band. I can't go grocery shopping without a calculator. I had to decide which bills to not pay so I could make this trip. She called out the $40,000 furniture allotment each senator gets as nearly as much as the West Virginia median income of $43,000. And when she looked in the camera and said, shame on you, shame on me, and shame on every one of us for not rattling the windows with cries of outrage at a government that thinks its offices are worthy of $40,000 a year, but families and children aren't, I about fell out of my seat. I mean, I had tears streaming down my face, and I thought, if that's not a Wonder Woman, I don't know what is. But Amy Jo will say, you know, she has a long legacy of people behind her that led her to be able to step up and say those things and give that powerful testimony. So I was thinking it might be really nice to show you what some of our West Virginia, this is not all, you have to remember we've been doing this 10 years, so we have about 500 West Virginia Wonder Women. But what is striking, and this is just a selection of our Wonder Women, if this will play, let me see if that goes, but it will show you the breadth of all of the women who have come since. Uh-oh. Did I do something?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do it differently if we're gonna show the video.
Oh, it won't click on that? Okay. How do you recommend?
Where is the video? Is it on YouTube or something?
Oh, I had it embedded in that.
First of all, we need to import that video.
Okay, so it wouldn't just play from the PowerPoint? Did I do something wrong?
No, I should have asked you if you had video. Anytime you do video, you have an audio.
I can see if I have I can probably find it on YouTube, actually. Do you want me to look? Would that be easier?
I don't think we'll be able to play from that.
All right, let's see if we can find this one. I think there's a link in it. I can text somebody now. Yeah, that's good. Huh? They be able to hear it.
No, it didn't say what, I guess it was balance.
Super excited to see that's next door. Also the fastest talking person I know. So we can give them a clap. So as you can see, we have a long heritage of women, and I think some of these women that we featured here will be 100 years from now, will be telling their stories as well. So any questions? Any questions for me?
I wanted to comment, I was thrilled at how proudly the women announced that they
Yeah.
were West
Yeah, that
Virginia.
Yeah.
Definitely came across.
Yeah, it's such an empowering event too, when all the women are in the same room together. It's amazing. And partly, you know, I always say this, like women, I mean, we get stuff done, you know, and it's when you get women together in a room of like-minded women, it doesn't matter, like the differences all fall away. And it's just an incredible, powerful feeling. And so every West Virginia Wonder Woman, they kind of wear that as a badge of honor, which I'm really, really excited about because for so long.
It's a lot to your credit too.
Well, thank you, but
Begin that.
I think it was, you know, they did the work, you know, it was just being acknowledged how many women, myself included, you know, when someone wants to say something like, you're always like making excuses. Oh, I didn't really do anything. You push it off. You don't really step. It's kind of our nature. We don't step into owning that. So it's important for other people, I think, to step up and say, no, you know, what you've done is wonderful. So, other questions? Comments?
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.